I come in the name of Jesus Christ, the Lion of Judah, the King of all kings. By the power in the mighty name of Jesus, I command you to fall. By the power in the mighty name of Jesus, I command you to fall.
They say the road through ISU is cursed. Not in secret, not just in the corners of beer parlors or whispered between market women. No. The fear is open now. You can hear it in the way drivers mutter prayers as they approach the roundabout. You can see it in how passengers grip their seats tighter, how pedestrians pause and quickly cross themselves before passing by. Everyone who travels that road, traders, students, families, knows to slow down at each roundabout. Not because of the traffic, but because of what stands in the middle of it. A statue. Tall, dark, unmoving. Made of solid black iron, it stands over 10 feet high, arms spread wide, and in its right hand, a long, sharp blade raised to the sky. The blade is not hidden. It is not bent. It is not part of some ancient symbol. It gleams, polished and clean, as if it had been waiting. And the man cast in that iron? Chike. His face is carved with a slight smile, calm, proud, confident. His robes flow like he's in motion, and his eyes, though made of metal, seem to follow every soul that passes beneath him. To the people of ISU, Chike is a legend. A man of great wealth and greater generosity. He built roads when the government failed. He brought electricity to neighborhoods that had never known light. He opened schools, sponsored scholarships, and gave money to widows every Christmas. People called him the hand of God in human form. They loved him. They still do. But the road beneath his statue tells a different story. It tells of death, of blood, of crashes that make no sense, vehicles with brand new engines, brand new tires, suddenly flipping over or slamming into the roundabout like something invisible pushed them. Every month, sometimes 3 times, sometimes even 4, there's another accident. A bus coming back from a burial. A student on a bike, heading to write WAEC. A family bringing Christmas gifts for their village. By the time help arrives, there's already blood on the ground. And always, always, the statue is standing above it, the blade clean, untouched, shining in the sun. Some people say it's just coincidence. That accidents happen everywhere. That the road is too tight. That maybe it's the fault of careless drivers or bad brakes. But how do you explain how only that spot sees such death? How do you explain cars that stop working near the statue, only to start again once they're pushed away? Or children who cry when passing by, for no reason at all? Or animals that avoid that side of the road completely? Some say it's all superstition. Some say it's nonsense. But in their hearts, everyone in ISU knows, the statue is not ordinary. They won't say it out loud, not in front of Chike, not in public, not even during village meetings. But at night, when the fires burn low and the wind blows across the rooftops, the whispers return. Because while the elders still call Chike a blessing, and the poor still kneel for his gifts, the roundabout calls him something else. A butcher in silk. But it wasn't always this way. There was a time when the statue brought pride, not fear. A time when the roundabout was just a roundabout, and people passed through with smiles, not prayers. At first, after the statue was built, there was peace. But peace never lasts where darkness hides behind a smile. And in ISU, darkness had taken its seat, tall, proud, and made of iron. For many years, each roundabout was the living heart of ISU. It was not just a place where roads met. It was where lives crossed, where people from 5 different directions came together. Traders from nearby villages, students returning from school, families going to weddings or burials, all passed through this roundabout. It was a place of motion, connection, and stories. The roundabout brought business to ISU. It gave the town a central identity. If you lived anywhere nearby, you knew each roundabout. Then, one day, everything began to change. It started quietly, with a visit to the palace. Chike came, not dressed like a man of war or politics, but calm and smiling as always. His agbada was white. His steps were light. His face carried the kind of peace that made people feel safe, and that made men let down their guard. He met the king, King Okendo, under the old mango tree in the palace courtyard. The tree had shaded kings before him, and many serious talks had taken place beneath its wide leaves. "My king," Chief Aji said, bowing slightly, "I've come with one final request." The king, old and wise, raised his hand and blessed him. "You've already done so much for ISU," the king replied warmly. "If you want another title, say the word. If it's leadership you seek, I've heard even the governor has eyes on you." But Chief Aji laughed softly, shaking his head. "No, your majesty," he said. "No more titles. No more crowns. I only want one thing now, for the people to remember me." The king listened, curious. "I want to build a statue," Aji continued. "Not in pride. Not to boast. Just so that when I am gone, my name remains. Let me place it at the very center of each roundabout, the heart of our great town." The king's smile faded slightly. "That spot is too central," he said. "It's sacred to traffic and movement. A statue there would block space, cause confusion. That roundabout is for direction signs, not monuments." Chief Aji nodded. "I understand. That's why I didn't come as a title holder or donor today. I came as a son of this soil, who has given his heart to this land." Then, from the folds of his wide sleeve, he pulled out a leather envelope and placed it gently on the king's lap. It made a soft sound, thick, full, and unmistakable. Money. Fresh Naira notes. Bundled. Crisp. Silent. "And," Aji added, "once the statue is complete, a brand new Prado Jeep will be waiting in your compound, with your name written on the keyholder." King Okendo looked at the envelope, then at the man before him. He didn't speak immediately. For a moment, the wind rustled the mango leaves above them. The guards at the gate shifted slightly. The sky was quiet, watching. Finally, the king gave a slow smile. He placed a hand over the envelope and said, "Then so be it. The people will remember you, Aji. Forever." From that moment on, the decision was made. The heart of the town would hold not just roads and stories anymore, but the image of a man who had given much, and asked, in return, for something that seemed so small. But nothing placed at the center of a people's life is ever small. And some gifts come with a shadow. The statue took 3 full months to complete. It wasn't a small project. It wasn't built by the regular workers from ISU. Chief Aji brought in professionals from far away, Enugu, Asaba, even Port Harcourt. He wanted the best sculptors, welders, and builders. Every single person working on the statue was paid well, and they did their job without question. From morning till evening, they shaped the metal. They cut, welded, and raised iron. Each hammer strike rang through the roundabout like a warning bell, but no one paid attention. The villagers came out every day to watch. Children played in the dust nearby. Traders snapped pictures with their phones. Drivers slowed down to take a look. Everyone was excited to see their hero's statue come to life. When the blade was added to the statue's hand, a long, sharp sword made of dark metal, no one complained. No one even asked why it was holding a weapon. They believed in Chief Aji. He explained it himself during one of his surprise visits to the site. "It is not a weapon," he said, smiling. "It's a symbol of strength, of protection, of vigilance. Let this remind our enemies that ISU is no longer weak." The people nodded. After all, this was the man who gave them roads, electricity, water, and schools. He could have built a palace for himself. He could have taken another chieftaincy title. Instead, he only asked for one thing, to be remembered. So they gave him that. They didn't know what else they were giving. But something happened at night, something none of the villagers saw. When the workers packed their tools, when the last Danfo drove off and the site was quiet, Chief Aji returned. He didn't come with his usual entourage. He came alone. He didn't wear his usual white lace or his traditional beads. No wristwatch. No smile. Just a dark wrapper tied around his waist, his chest bare, covered in strange black markings drawn with charcoal and ash. He came quietly. He moved with purpose. And at the base of the rising statue, under the cover of moonlight, he began his ritual. It started with blood. He brought a clay bowl. Inside was a black rooster, its eyes wide and body still. He whispered words, not Igbo, not any language spoken today. The words sounded like chanting from a forgotten world. Then came the blade. He slit the rooster's neck swiftly. The blood poured into the bowl, then onto the soil at the base of the statue, into the concrete, into the cracks, into the foundation. The next night, he came again. Another rooster. Another chant. Another offering. The third night. The fourth. For 7 nights, Chief Aji returned, always alone, always under the stars, always in the same dark cloth. No one caught him. No one even suspected. The workers slept soundly. The villagers snored peacefully. But something beneath the earth was changing. On the 7th night, the ritual changed. There was no rooster this time. No clay bowl. Chief Aji knelt down slowly at the statue's feet, the iron still unfinished, and placed both of his hands flat against it. He closed his eyes and began to speak. But what he said was not human speech. The wind stopped blowing. The air grew bitter, like burnt metal and rotting leaves. Everything fell completely silent. Then, the most terrifying part, though the statue was not yet polished. The blade began to shine. It shimmered gently in the moonlight as if something had awakened inside it. By dawn, Chief Aji was gone. When the workers arrived that morning, ready to continue their tasks, they noticed nothing, only that the sight somehow felt different. The air was heavy, thicker, as if something was watching them. But the construction continued. 3 months after it began, the statue was complete. It stood tall, over 10 feet, in the very center of Eek Roundabout. On the day of the unveiling, the people gathered. They clapped and cheered. Even the king came and shook hands with Chief Aji. The statue looked strong, proud, and unforgettable. Only one man knew what truly stood beneath it. Only Aji knew what had been fed. And the blade, polished now, continued to gleam. The first accident was a tragedy. The second felt like a warning. But the third, fourth, and fifth, those were no longer accidents, at least, not in the minds of the people of ISU. When the young couple died at the foot of the statue, it shook the village to its core. The boy had just gotten married. The girl was still wearing the gold bangles from her wedding. Their joy had not yet faded when death came, quick and cruel. They said it was the bike. They said the brake failed. But the people who stood by and saw the blood trailing from the statue's base, they couldn't shake the feeling that something else was involved. The girl was buried in her mother's compound the next day. The boy's body was returned to Umuoji, his hometown. Their graves were barely covered when the next horror came. A trailer, a heavy-duty truck loaded with bags of cement, came thundering down the road, heading straight for Eek Roundabout. Witnesses said the driver looked terrified. He held down the horn, a long, desperate sound that pierced the village air, as the truck sped forward uncontrollably. He tried to steer. He tried to stop. But the trailer swerved once, tipped to the side, and crashed, flipping directly onto a group of 5 villagers who had been standing near a kiki, chatting and waiting for a ride. They were crushed instantly. Their bones snapped like dry sticks. Glass shattered. Cries filled the air, then fell silent. By the time anyone could react, it was over. And once again, the blood ran toward the statue, pooling at the base, soaking into the same ground that had already claimed the young couple just weeks before. This time, the village didn't just grieve. It whispered. Old men who usually sat at the roadside began lowering their voices. They said the statue was not ordinary. They said its blade was cursed. Some claimed they had seen shadows moving around the statue at night, figures that had no body, just darkness. One market woman told her neighbor that she had heard the statue breathing. Like a man with a heavy chest, she said, but made of metal. Slow, deep, watching me as I passed. No one dared speak these things out loud in public. No one wanted trouble. After all, this was Chief Aji's statue. It was built by the man who gave them everything: roads, light, water, food. How could they now say it was causing death? Wasn't it just a statue? They told themselves these things. They told each other. But fear had already entered the village. Then, as suddenly as the accidents had started, they stopped. For 2 months, not a single death was reported at Eek Roundabout. No broken bones. No overturned cars. No cries. No blood. Even the whispers began to fade. People relaxed. Children played near the roundabout again. The king, who had grown quiet after the earlier deaths, started appearing at public events. He even gave a speech at a local festival. People laughed again. Some began to believe the worst was over. It was just a bad season, they said. Everything is fine now. But peace has a strange way of preparing for pain. Because just when the village had exhaled and started to move on, Chike had not set foot in ISU for over 12 years. Once upon a time, he was just a stubborn, street-smart boy who sold phone chargers and power banks at Eek Market. He was known for his sharp tongue, fast sales, and dreams that stretched far beyond the dusty roads of the village. But Chike had always wanted more. At 17, he left ISU for Lagos. From there, with the help of an old friend, he traveled to the United States. While others chased degrees or status, Chike chased money. He worked odd jobs, saved every dollar, and sent home what he could, always through his uncle, who promised to manage his savings and build him a house on his late father's land. Year after year, he sent money. He never complained. He never visited. But the house kept rising, first the foundation, then the walls, then the roof. Photos came through WhatsApp. His uncle assured him, "Everything is ready. Just come home." Now, after more than a decade away, Chike was finally returning. This was meant to be his homecoming, his moment of glory. No one in the village knew. He wanted it that way. He planned to arrive quietly, walk through the gates of his new mansion, and shock them all, the ones who thought he'd never make it. He imagined the wide eyes, the open mouths, the greetings, the praise, the pride. But Chike never made it home. It was a hot afternoon when his plane touched down at Owerri Airport. The time was 3:45 p.m. when he stepped outside with his luggage, found a taxi, and gave the driver simple instructions. "Take me to ISU, near Eek Market." The journey was smooth. For the first hour, nothing went wrong. The roads were clear. The trees on both sides danced gently with the wind. Chike opened the window and let the breeze wash over his face. He looked around at the familiar signs, the red sands, the plantain trees, the painted walls with political posters. He was close. Then, around 5 p.m., they approached Eek Roundabout. The driver slowed down, his hands tight on the steering wheel. His eyes kept moving, from the road to the statue and back. Even he looked uneasy. Chike noticed it. He leaned forward and stared out the front window. "Ah," he said, smiling. "So that's the statue I've been hearing about, eh? Man really put himself in the middle of the town." The driver said nothing. Then, in a split second, everything changed. A motorbike, out of nowhere, swerved sharply in front of them. The driver shouted in panic. He slammed on the brakes. Tires screamed. The car spun once, hard. Then again, faster. Before anyone could think, the taxi crashed straight into the base of the statue. There was a horrible sound of shattering glass and crushing metal. And then, silence. The statue stood tall, untouched. The blade in its hand caught the evening sun and shimmered softly, as if nothing had happened. Inside the car, Chike's head had slammed into the passenger window. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He died instantly. The driver survived, but his leg was broken. He screamed for help as people gathered, shocked and confused. Some recognized Chike. Some didn't. His bags were still in the boot. His wallet was still in his back pocket. His phone buzzed once, a welcome message from MTN. He had returned home. But he never saw the mansion. He never touched the gate he paid for. He never walked through the front door. He never sat on the couch he paid to ship from the U.S. All he saw in the end was the blade. For a little while, ISU was quiet again. The statue stood still. The roads were calm. There were no screams, no crashes, no new graves to dig. People began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst had passed. But it was only a pause, not peace. And then came December 24th. It was the day before Christmas, a time of joy, laughter, music, and homecomings. That morning, a family of 6 left Port Harcourt, heading back to their hometown, ISU. The father had worked in the city for years. This Christmas, he promised his children something special: new clothes, jollof rice with chicken, fireworks, and music. The children were excited. In the bus, they played loud music from a Bluetooth speaker and sang along with Christmas carols. The wife had packed food for the road, and the youngest child, a girl no older than 4, kept pointing at every village they passed, asking, "Is that ISU?" They were almost home. Just a few more minutes, just one more bend, and then they reached Chike roundabout. That's where it happened. There was no traffic. There was no rain. The road was dry, clear, normal. But as the bus made its way around the roundabout, it suddenly crashed, straight into a parked car near the statue. No one could explain it. The parked car wasn't blocking the way. The driver of the bus hadn't been speeding. The weather was perfect. The bus was in good condition. Still, the crash happened. Hard, loud, final. When people rushed to the scene, it was too late. 6 lives gone. The father, the mother, all 4 children, gone. On the day the world was supposed to celebrate birth and joy, ISU prepared 6 funerals. The sound of crying filled the streets. The new clothes, once worn with excitement, were now soaked with blood. The Christmas decorations at the family's compound were taken down without a word. No one ate. No one danced. The village went silent again. But the silence didn't last. Because just 4 days later, on December 31st, death returned. This time, it came for a boy named Ibuka. He was just 20 years old, full of life, full of laughter. He had recently joined the choir at his church and was practicing for the crossover night service. It was to be his first time singing on New Year's Eve, something he had looked forward to for weeks. That evening, he was walking home from rehearsal, holding his hymn book and humming softly. His friend said he was in a good mood, smiling and joking about the fireworks planned for midnight. But as he reached the roundabout, he slowed down. Eyewitnesses said he stopped in front of the statue. He looked up, stared at it, like someone trying to remember something or listen to a voice only he could hear. Then, without warning, he took one slow step backward into the road. A bus, coming from the Umuoji side, didn't have time to stop. It hit him hard. Ibuka died before anyone could scream. The hymn book flew from his hands and landed in a nearby gutter. The pages flipped in the wind. He never made it to the new year. That December became the darkest the village had seen in years. They called it the Red December, not for decorations, not for celebration, but for the blood that stained the roundabout. People were no longer whispering. They were afraid. Because each time they thought it was over, the statue reminded them. It was still standing. And it was still watching. December in ISU was always special. The harmattan wind blew gently through the trees. The air was filled with the smell of roasted meat and fresh firewood. Families returned from faraway cities. Children ran barefoot through the streets, laughing and playing with their cousins. Music echoed from every compound, gospel in the mornings, highlife in the evenings. This December was no different. At least, not on the surface. Even though the village had just buried a family of 6, even though Ibuka's blood still marked the edge of the roundabout, people still tried to move on. Life, after all, must continue. Fairy lights were strung across windows. Church choirs practiced night and day. Mothers stocked up on ingredients for rice and stew. Children begged their parents for new slippers, fireworks, and chin-chin. Joy was in the air, even if it was sitting on top of silent fear. And as always, Chief Aji was ready to give. On Christmas Day, the gates of his grand mansion opened wide. It had become tradition. Every year since he dug the first borehole in the village, Chief Aji made sure no poor person in ISU went hungry during the holidays. This year, the gates opened wider than ever. Dozens of widows arrived early, wearing faded wrappers and holding plastic bowls. The poor came in hundreds, some from nearby villages, others from deep inside ISU. The line stretched far outside the compound. Inside the compound, it looked like a marketplace. There were tall stacks of rice bags, packed neatly like walls. Cartons of vegetable oil, tins of tomatoes, and seasoning cubes filled the ground like treasures. And the biggest attraction of all, cash envelopes. Each one packed tight with fresh Naira notes. Chief Aji sat under a large canopy, dressed in a white kaftan and red cap. He smiled and waved like a king. Each person who stepped forward received their gift with joy. Some knelt. Some shouted. Some danced. "God bless Chief Aji," they cried. "You will live long," another woman screamed, hugging her bag of rice. "You are the father of the land," one old man said, shaking with excitement as he received his envelope. The music got louder. Children clapped. Photographers snapped pictures. Videos were recorded and posted on social media with captions like, "This is what leadership looks like. The Lion of ISU has done it again." But not one person mentioned the 6 coffins that left the village 3 days ago. No one asked about Ibuka, the choir boy who never made it to the new year. No one looked at the roundabout. No one looked at the blade. They feasted. They laughed. They took their gifts home with full hands and empty memory. Because Aji had given. And to them, Aji was good. Aji was home. But just a few meters away, where the roads curved around the statue, the blade still stood. It was silent, yes. It didn't move. It didn't speak. But it watched. And as the December sun reflected off its sharp edge, the blade seemed to catch the light in a way that felt deliberate. As if to say, "You may forget, but I remember." Not everyone in ISU had forgotten. Even though the music had returned and people were smiling again, there were still those who watched in silence. There were still those who kept count of the deaths. Those who listened to the wind, the roads, and the fearful whispers hiding behind every smile. That same week, while villagers danced at Chief Aji's gates, the elders of ISU gathered beneath the sacred kola tree in the palace courtyard. It was an old tradition. Whenever there was confusion or fear in the land, the elders met beneath that tree to speak freely. They didn't bring drums or food. Just wrappers, walking sticks, and words filled with weight. Their wrappers were faded, their sandals dusty. But their eyes were sharp. And their voices were heavy with worry. 5 deaths in 1 month, said Motsianin, his voice low but firm. This is not ordinary. He looked around, and the others nodded in agreement. The roundabout has been there for how many years? Said another elder. We never saw this kind of thing before. People passed freely. There was laughter. There was life. But now, he continued, since the day that statue rose, the ground has not rested. Every other week, there is blood. Some of the elders nodded quietly. Others stayed silent. At the far end of the courtyard sat King Okendo on his high stool. His face was serious, but his eyes were hard to read. He listened to their words without interrupting. His hands were folded on his lap. After a short silence, he raised one hand. "Let us not rush to judgment," the king said carefully. His voice was calm, but there was tension beneath it. Yes, people have died. Yes, the village is worried. But accidents happen. They always have. Cars crash. Bikes lose control. Drivers make mistakes. This is not new. He paused, then looked at the group. We must be careful, he added. There is no proof that a statue is the cause. None of us saw it move. None of us saw it kill. There was a murmur among the elders, but no one dared speak over the king. Then Motsinkem leaned forward, his voice firm. Your Majesty, he said, the people are whispering. They are afraid to speak too loudly. Some no longer take the roundabout at night. Some even avoid it completely. Fear is growing. The king didn't respond immediately. Another elder spoke up. We patched the road, he said. We repainted the warning signs. We even fixed the streetlight. We did all we could to prevent accidents. But still, they continue. One elder tapped his staff lightly against the ground. Even animals are not this stubborn, he muttered. When danger is near, they run. But we pretend not to see. The king let out a slow breath. His eyes flicked toward the palace gate, as though expecting someone to walk in. But no one came. Finally, he sat back and spoke again. I will look into it, he said. I promise you that. He looked around the circle of old men. But until we have proof, let no one accuse anyone. We cannot point fingers at a man who has done so much for this land. Chief Aji has built roads. He brought water, light, hospitals. We must not forget that. There was grumbling among the elders. Some exchanged glances. Others simply shook their heads. But none dared argue openly with the king. One by one, they picked up their walking sticks, stood, and slowly made their way out of the courtyard. The meeting was over. But the matter was not settled. The king did not leave his stool. Long after the elders were gone, he remained seated, staring at nothing in particular. He was thinking. His face showed no fear, no doubt. But inside, something was stirring. And he waited, not for answers, but for whatever came next. That evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees and the crickets began to sing, Chief Aji arrived at the palace. His entrance was noisy, bold, and full of power. The village children ran to the roadside to watch as his convoy rolled in like royalty. At the front was a black Hilux truck, carrying 4 armed men, soldiers in uniform, holding rifles. Behind them came 2 Prado jeeps, their engines humming like lions. The cars were spotless, shining under the evening light. The windows were dark, hiding the faces inside. Dust rose into the air as they came to a stop at the palace gate. Chief Aji stepped out. He wore a crisp white senator outfit, neatly ironed, with golden buttons that caught the light from the nearby lanterns. His wristwatch sparkled like glass under the stars. He wore dark shades, even though the sun had almost fully set. Everything about him said one thing: power. The palace guards stepped aside without a word. They didn't need instructions. Aji was not just a visitor, he was a man above men. He walked into the palace like he owned it. "My king," he said smoothly, giving a respectful bow as he entered the hall. King Okendo sat on his throne, waiting. He nodded in return. "Aji," the king said, "we need to talk." There was no music, no guards, no elders. Just the 2 of them, old allies, now caught between truth and silence. They both took their seats. "The elders have come," the king began, his voice low but serious. "They met under the kola tree this morning." Aji said nothing. He listened with a calm face. "They are worried about the statue," the king continued. "They say it is bringing death. Too many accidents, too much blood. The people are starting to talk. Even the boldest are now afraid to pass the roundabout at night." Chief Aji exhaled slowly, leaned back in his chair, and then laughed softly, not the laugh of someone amused, but of someone completely in control. "Your Majesty," he said, voice smooth as oil, "you know our people. Give them too much freedom, and they will blame the rain for soaking their feet." He shook his head gently. "These are the lies of men who envy what I have built. They cannot match my success, so they look for shadows to hide in. They see my statue and call it pride. They see my name and call it sorcery. What will they say next? That I control thunder and lightning." The king did not respond immediately. He rubbed his chin. Finally, he asked quietly, "So the statue, it is just a statue?" Chief Aji's smile did not fade. "Of course," he said calmly. "Just steel and paint. Nothing more." Then, as if to end the conversation, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a bundle of fresh Naira notes. The money looked untouched, straight from the mint, still stiff and clean. He placed it gently on the king's table, between them. The king stared at the bundle for a few seconds. His face was unreadable. Then he smiled. And just like that, the tension in the room vanished, like it had never existed. "So tell me," the king asked, shifting in his seat and relaxing. "That Prado you promised last month, did it come with a reverse camera?" Chief Aji laughed. "My king," he said proudly, "the car parks itself now." The king laughed loudly, the kind of laugh that fills a room and chases away silence. And so, they began talking about road projects, holiday plans, and New Year celebrations. Not once did they mention the statue again. Not once did they speak of the blood of ISU, still fresh on the ground near the roundabout. Later that night, Chief Aji stepped back into his convoy. The engines started. The guards took position. And the vehicles disappeared down the road, their red lights vanishing into the darkness. The night returned to silence. But not for long. The sun hung high in the sky, bright and unforgiving, the kind that burned through clothes and soaked shirts with sweat. The dust on the road rose with each passing vehicle, swirling around as though stirred by invisible hands. It was under this heat that Pastor Bassey's car broke down, right in front of Chike roundabout. He had left Umuahia that morning, heading to a revival program in Umuse, a town just a few miles from ISU. His Bible lay peacefully on the passenger seat beside him, and his white shirt, once neatly ironed, was now damp beneath the collar from the heat. The windows were rolled down. Gospel music hummed from the speakers. The journey had been smooth, the road clear, the sky bright, until, without warning, the engine sputtered, then coughed, then died. The car rolled slowly to the side of the road, coming to a stop near the roundabout. The pastor sighed in frustration, wiped sweat from his forehead, and muttered a soft prayer. "Not now, Lord," he whispered. "Please, not today." He stepped out, walked to the front of the car, and lifted the bonnet with one hand, hoping it was something simple. And then he saw it. The statue. Tall, black, unmoving. Its blade gleamed in the sun like a fresh cutlass. It looked as if it had just been polished that morning. For a moment, Pastor Bassey froze. His hands still held the bonnet, but his eyes were locked on the statue. Because he had seen it before. Not in person. Not in photographs. But in a dream that had left him gasping for breath just the night before. In that dream, he stood at the center of a burning village. ISU. Around him were crying women, bloodied men, and lifeless bodies lying across the roads. At the center of it all stood the statue. Unmoving, unshaken, uncaring, and from the tip of its blade, fresh blood dripped to the ground. Then, in a voice that did not belong to any man, the Holy Spirit spoke. "Go to the king of this land. Tell him, demolish the idol, or calamity will not cease." Now, standing in front of the real thing, Bassey felt his heart begin to race. He slowly closed the bonnet and walked around to the driver's side. He opened the door, stepped in, and turned the ignition. The car started immediately. No delay. No sound. Just life. His eyes widened. He whispered, "Thank you, Lord," and took it as confirmation. He knew what he had to do. He began asking around. "Please, where can I find the king's palace?" he asked. Most people were polite, if not a little confused. A man selling bananas pointed. "The king's palace? Follow this road down. You'll see a big red gate. You can't miss it." Bassey nodded and drove carefully through the village. When he arrived at the palace, King Okendo was seated outside under a canopy, talking quietly with an elder. The palace guards, dressed in plain uniforms, stood at the gate. Bassey introduced himself. "I am Pastor Bassey," he said, "from God's Intervention Ministry, Umuahia." The guards let him through. "Your Majesty," Bassey greeted, giving a respectful bow. "I bring you greetings in the name of the Lord." "You are welcome, Pastor," the king said. "Come, sit down." The elder shifted slightly to listen. Bassey sat. His hands trembled slightly as he rested them on his knees. "Your Majesty," he began, "I did not come by accident. I was sent by the Spirit of God. Last night I received a vision. I saw the statue at the roundabout. Blood flowed beneath it. People were dying. And I heard a voice, the Holy Spirit, tell me clearly, tell the king to demolish it, or calamity will not stop." The elder frowned, leaning forward. Pastor Bassey continued, voice soft but serious. "That statue is not ordinary. It is not just metal. It is cursed. It feeds. And as long as it stands in ISU, this land will not know peace." A heavy silence followed. The king stared at the pastor. His face showed no emotion. After a long pause, he stood, smiled, and extended his hand. "Thank you, Pastor," he said kindly. "We appreciate your concern. May God bless your ministry." Pastor Bassey stood, bowed again, and walked out, feeling that he had done his duty. He had delivered the message. He had obeyed God. As soon as he left, the king turned to the elder and laughed softly. "Let's not mind him," he said. These are the types who want attention. Maybe he's hoping someone in America will see his picture preaching against idols and send him money. The elder chuckled. Or maybe he's hoping for a piece of land to plant his church. They both laughed, louder now. And just like that, the warning was ignored. But God had not closed the matter. In the months that followed, the statue stood tall and silent. And for a while, there were no accidents. No deaths. Not even a scratch on the road. Some said perhaps the prayers were working. Others said it was just a coincidence. People stopped worrying. But then, in early May, a Chike ran off the road at the roundabout and flipped 3 times. The driver was crushed and died before help arrived. 2 weeks later, a schoolteacher returning from Umuahia crashed into a tree, at the very same curve near the statue. 1 month after that, a delivery truck burst into flames on a quiet afternoon. The driver escaped with burns, but the vehicle was completely destroyed. Once a month. Sometimes twice. The pattern had returned. The deaths had returned. And yet, the king said nothing. And the villagers? They still lined up at Chief Aji's compound, smiling, arms full of rice, oil, and envelopes, their eyes wide with gratitude. But blind to the blood still soaking the ground beneath the statue. For many years, King Okendo had spoken of his only son with a heart full of pride. To him, Ikena was more than a boy, he was a future. Sent to Cambridge University at just 17, the young prince was to return one day and lead ISU with wisdom, strength, and knowledge from across the seas. His chosen course was political science, and the king often said, "He will be greater than me. He will rule with understanding. Let him learn from the world and come back to make ours better." The villagers believed it too. They watched Ikena's story like a fairy tale come alive, the prince who left as a boy and would return a man of vision. His name was spoken with respect. His photos appeared in newspapers and on Facebook posts. Palace messengers read his letters aloud during council meetings. He was not just a student, he was the pride of ISU. And when the news came that he was returning home, the entire palace came alive. Preparations began days in advance. The cooks prepared palm wine and delicacies. The drummers tuned their instruments. A red carpet was rolled out from the palace gate to the front courtyard. Even the palace gates were repainted, for the sun was coming home. But Ikena never made it. He landed safely at Anambra Airport around noon. A palace-assigned taxi driver waited for him with a cardboard sign, "Welcome, Prince Ikena." His luggage, 2 boxes and a carry-on, was carefully placed in the trunk. Ikena looked healthy, calm, and excited. He wore a plain shirt, jeans, and a leather wristwatch. His scent was of confidence and return. Inside the car, he talked softly with the driver. He spoke of ISU, of the mango tree in the palace yard, of the nights he lay in the courtyard as a boy, counting stars, of his father's strong voice, and how he missed hearing him in person. The driver smiled and nodded. It was a peaceful drive, until they reached Eek roundabout. The sun had begun to drop lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. The heat of the afternoon was easing, and golden light reflected off the statue of Chief Aji. The blade in the statue's hand caught the sun and flashed briefly, a sharp, cold glint. The car moved smoothly into the curve. Then, without warning, the front tire exploded. It flew off with force, rolling violently across the roundabout. The driver lost control. The taxi spun once, then twice, before it crashed sideways, colliding first with a parked motorcycle and then slamming hard into the concrete curb. The driver's head hit the steering wheel, and the windshield cracked like lightning across the glass. People nearby screamed and ran toward the wreck. The driver survived, badly wounded, blood pouring from a gash on his arm. But Ikena's head had struck the iron base of a streetlight. His neck twisted unnaturally. Blood flowed from his nose, soaking into his shirt. He died instantly. No one could believe it. The prince, the child of ISU, the future king, had returned from England not to take the throne, but to die at the feet of a statue his father had once defended. News spread fast. By the time it reached the palace, everything went silent, as if the walls themselves stopped breathing. The king collapsed into his royal chair, his hand gripping the armrest tightly, his crown tilting to one side. The queen let out a scream so loud it shook the birds from the trees. She ran through the halls, crying out his name, her voice filled with a mother's pain that had no end. The servants froze. Musicians quietly packed their drums and left without a word. No food was served. No celebration took place. By evening, the palace was still. The king remained in his royal chambers, sitting in the dark with no lights lit. His eyes were red. His voice dry. His lips trembled each time he tried to speak. "He is gone," he whispered finally. "My son, my only son." The pain sat in the room with him, heavy and uninvited. For the first time since the statue rose, the blood meant something. For the first time, the king understood the fear in the elders' eyes, the trembling in the villagers' voices, the silence that followed every crash. And now, the silence had come to his own gates. He didn't wait. That same night, still dressed in his royal wrapper, his feet bare, his crown forgotten on the table, he sent word to the elders. They came quietly. One by one, the elders of ISU returned to the palace, but this time there was no talk of tradition, no kola nut, no greetings or long speeches. Even the guards at the palace gate bowed their heads as the elders passed. The air was heavy. The prince was dead. Inside the palace hall, the chairs were arranged in a circle, but no one sat until King Okendo entered. When he finally walked in, the room fell silent. He wore plain white, no crown, no royal robe, no staff of authority. Just a simple wrapper and a shirt, clean but unadorned. His eyes were swollen. His steps slow. He looked not like a king, but like a man who had lost everything. He stood before the council. His voice, when he began to speak, was low but clear, a voice stretched by grief. "This morning," he said, pausing, "my son, Ikenna, was taken by that roundabout." No one moved. No one dared speak. "I refused to see the truth," he continued. "When you came to me with warnings, I called you superstitious. I laughed at your fear. I said there was no proof." He looked around the circle, eyes meeting each elder one by one. "But now I have seen the proof with my own eyes. I have felt it in my own blood." His voice cracked. He paused, then looked down at his hands as if they too were stained. "I accepted gifts. I closed my ears. I turned my face from what was clear. I let Aji build that statue and I defended it. I allowed his power to grow. And now..." His breath caught. For a moment, he looked as if he might fall. But then he straightened, lifted his head, and spoke with a strength that surprised them all. "Now I have paid with my only son." The hall was still. Even the wind outside had gone quiet, as if the earth itself waited to hear what he would say next. "Before I bury my son," the king said, his voice now firm, "that statue must be brought down." For a moment, there was only silence. Then a soft murmur began, like a wave spreading through the room. Some of the elders nodded quietly, their faces hard with resolve. Others looked down in mourning. One or two whispered prayers under their breath. Even Matsi Anin, who had always been the voice of caution, spoke gently. "It is time." No one objected. No one hesitated. They all knew the truth now. But they also knew something else, something unspoken, yet understood by all. Chief Aji would not let the statue fall without a fight. He had power. He had followers. He had soldiers. And whatever lived inside that statue, it was not going to leave quietly. Still, the king had spoken. The decision was made. The old alliances were breaking. The silence was ending. The real battle was about to begin. The palace of ISU was unusually quiet. Not the silence of peace, but the kind that came just before a storm, when even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The guards stood taller. The elders sat straighter. And King Okendo, dressed once again in royal white, remained seated on his throne with a face carved from stone. Then, Chief Aji arrived. His convoy of dark SUVs and Hilux trucks pulled into the palace courtyard with practiced precision. The engines barely had time to cool before the back door of the lead car swung open. Aji stepped out, just as he always did, dressed in a spotless white outfit, a bold red cap sitting on his head. His golden wristwatch glinted in the evening sun. His expression was calm, unreadable. He walked through the gates without fear, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor of the great hall. Inside, the elders watched in silence. He approached the throne and knelt briefly, then looked up at the king with practiced sorrow. "Your Majesty," he said, voice soft and respectful, "I came as soon as I heard. I mourn with you. Ikena was a bright light. May the gods give you strength." King Okendo did not respond right away. Instead, he looked to the long wooden bench where Motsi Anin, Motsin Kem, and the rest of the council sat. They said nothing, but their eyes held judgment. When the king finally rose from his throne, his movement was slow, controlled. His voice was calm, but behind it was fire. "We have grieved together," he said. "Now, we act together." He looked Aji directly in the eyes. "The elders and I have decided, the statue at Eek Roundabout must be demolished." A quiet but powerful nod spread through the council like a ripple. There was no debate, no hesitation. It was not a request. It was a verdict. Chief Aji's smile vanished. His posture remained straight, but his jaw tightened. "My king," he said carefully, "with all due respect, the statue is not the cause of these accidents. You are acting from pain, not reason. There is no proof, only emotion." The king's voice turned firm. "We brought you here not to debate, but to inform. The council has spoken. The people are ready. The statue will fall." For a long moment, silence returned. Chief Aji looked around the room, scanning the eyes of the elders. None met his gaze. Then his voice changed. Gone was the calm tone. Gone was the false humility. What remained was sharp, full of warning. "No one," he said slowly, "dares lay a finger on that statue." He took one step closer. "You think because you wear a crown, you can erase my work? That you can break what I have built?" The king's voice rose. "And who are you to say that?" he thundered. "You may rule in wealth, but I rule in land. I am still the king of ISU. My word is final." Chief Aji's eyes narrowed. "Then let's see if your crown can protect you." He turned sharply, his robe swinging as he stormed out of the hall, footsteps echoing louder than before. His guards fell in line, and the doors slammed shut behind him. Inside, no one moved. The elders sat frozen, stunned not just by the words exchanged, but by the darkness that had passed through the room like a shadow. The king lowered himself back onto the throne, hands gripping the armrests. "So be it," he whispered. Then came the wind. Outside the palace, the skies, once clear, began to shift. A thick wind blew through the trees, shaking branches and whistling through the compound like a warning. The flags at the palace gate flapped violently. Loose sand rose from the ground and spiraled into the air. The guards looked up. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, deep and slow. The elders turned to the open windows as the light from the setting sun faded behind fast-moving clouds. The confrontation had happened. And now, something greater was coming. The sun had barely dipped behind the hills when King Okendo gave his next order. "Send for the pastor." No messengers. No announcement. Just one simple instruction, and within hours, Pastor Bassi arrived at the palace. He came in a dusty Sienna van, humble and unguarded. There was no convoy, no crowd, no show of power. He stepped out with nothing more than a worn leather Bible, a small bottle of anointing oil, and the same quiet fire in his eyes that he had carried the day he warned the king. The palace guards saluted him. The elders welcomed him without words. Inside the council hall, the king stood waiting, still dressed in white, but this time wearing his royal beads. "Man of God," the king began, his voice heavy with purpose, "we are ready, but the enemy may fight." Bassi stepped forward. He did not flinch. He did not blink. "He will fight," he said. "But the power of God must prevail. For the land, for the people, and for the blood that has soaked the ground." The room fell into solemn silence. There was no need to say more. That night, the king sent word across ISU, quietly and carefully, calling for only the bravest men in the land. Not soldiers. Not politicians. He summoned builders. He summoned vigilante men who guarded the streets by night with sticks and machetes. Men whose hearts did not shake easily. By midnight, a dozen of them had gathered inside the palace. They came with hand tools, hammers, chains, chisels, iron cutters. Nothing fancy. Nothing from the government. Just the strength of men and the will to end what should never have begun. By dawn, they were ready. The sun had barely touched the sky when the quiet procession moved toward Chike roundabout. The town was still asleep. The morning was still cool. But in the air was a kind of charge, like something ancient was watching. They walked in silence. The king, wrapped in his royal white cloth, leading the way. Pastor Bassi, holding his Bible high in his right hand and the oil bottle in the other. The elders, dressed in traditional wrappers, walking in rows behind. And the 12 brave men, their tools in hand, their eyes set on the statue ahead. When they arrived, they formed a circle around the statue. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Pastor Bassi stepped forward and began to pray. Lord, we stand not in fear, but in faith. We are not here by our power, but by yours. Let every idol be broken. Let every curse return to the sender. Let your light fall where this darkness has ruled. The men chorused, Amen. And then, the first hammer rose, swung with force, and struck the statue's base. Clang! The sound rang out across the empty street. And that's when they heard it. Enghai! The roar of engines. Tires screeching. Boots hitting ground. A convoy of black Hilux trucks and armored vans burst onto the roundabout, surrounding them on all sides. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows from the armed men pouring out of the vehicles. Soldiers. Fully armed, fully alert, and fully under someone else's command. At the head of the formation was Chief Aji. His arms were folded. His face expressionless. But his presence was louder than the engines that brought him. The army commander, tall and sharp-eyed, stepped forward. His voice cut through the morning air like a blade. Drop your tools. He raised his rifle. No one touches this statue. I repeat, no one. If you make a move, we will shoot. Gasps spread among the elders. Even the workmen paused, gripping their tools tighter but unsure. The king stepped forward. I am the king of this land, he said firmly. You have no authority here. The commander didn't blink. I don't take orders from you, he replied coldly. I take orders from Chief Aji. One more move, and someone dies. Behind him, the soldiers cocked their guns. The elders backed away slowly. The brave men lowered their tools, unsure of what to do. But Pastor Bassi did not move. He stood still, his lips whispering in tongues, his hand clutching the Bible tight to his chest. His eyes were closed. His feet, planted like a tree by the river. Then Aji turned toward the king. His smile was small, cruel, confident. You should have stayed out of this. He turned away, gave a simple nod, and the commander signaled his men to hold position. No bullets were fired, but the message was clear. You will not win. That night, the palace went dark early. No lights. No laughter. No words. The king said nothing. Not to the elders. Not to his wife. Not even to God. Because if Aji would bring soldiers, then the king would bring something greater. The law. The next morning, the palace came alive with quiet urgency. King Okendo, eyes still dark from sleepless nights, sat at his writing table. In front of him was a clean sheet of government-stamped paper. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up his pen, but his mind was clear. No more delays. No more fear. This time, the fight would be carried above Chief Aji's reach. The letter began. To His Excellency, the Governor of the State, subject, urgent security breach in ISU community. He wrote everything. The statue. The deaths. The suspicions. The armed soldiers who dared point guns at a king. The violation of royal and civic law. He did not hold back. By noon, the letter had been sealed, stamped with the royal crest, and handed over to the palace courier. Ride straight to the government house, the king ordered. Do not stop. And so the message left ISU, quiet, but sharp as thunder. Less than 48 hours later, an answer came. But it wasn't just on paper. It came on wheels. On the third morning, before even the market women opened their stalls, a convoy of official vehicles rolled into ISU. No sirens. No music. No advance notice. Just the quiet rumble of well-maintained engines. Black jeeps marked with the State Military Command insignia moved through the main road like a knife through cloth. Soldiers in clean, sharp uniforms moved with discipline. Their eyes were focused. Their faces, unreadable. But this was not Chief Aji's convoy. This was government authority. The moment they arrived at Chike roundabout, they didn't hesitate. The rogue army commander, the one who had threatened to shoot villagers and obeyed only Chief Aji, was surrounded, disarmed, and handcuffed on the spot. His men, confused and frightened, were ordered to drop their weapons. Some resisted for a second. But when the state officers cocked their rifles, they obeyed. Within minutes, the commander was thrown into the back of a military van. His face was pale. His pride gone. Chief Aji's own convoy had not yet arrived. He was too late. And the people, they watched. From balconies. From shop fronts. From corners and alleyways. They stood still, mouths open, hearts racing. For the first time in years, something shifted. Aji's power cracked. Later that afternoon, the palace announced a public gathering at the village square. Everyone came, elders, youth, widows, children, traders, hunters, pastors. The town square buzzed with whispers. Then a palace guard stepped forward and opened a scroll. The governor's letter was read aloud to all. Let it be known. The land belongs to the people. The king is the custodian of the land. The laws of this state shall not be broken by any man, whether rich or poor. The statue at Chike roundabout is declared unauthorized. It shall be removed by order of the state. And no man, no matter how powerful, shall own the blood of a community. The crowd went silent. Even the air seemed to listen. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise, clapping, soft at first, then louder. The market women clapped. The youth shouted. Elders nodded in approval. The people of ISU had found their voice. 4 years, they had looked to Chief Aji as a god. Now they saw the man, and the cracks in his armor. That evening, the statue still stood. But it was different now. Its blade, which had once gleamed with pride, now seemed to tremble in the fading sun. It stood not as a symbol of strength, but as a target. And something about the ground around it felt uneasy. Because now, the battle was no longer in secret. Now it was public. And heaven had answered. The crowd stood still. From every corner of ISU, people had gathered, young and old, believers and doubters, kings and commoners, all standing in a circle around the statue that had haunted their community for years. Some clutched handkerchiefs, others held their children close. But none made a sound. It was as if the earth itself had paused to watch. The wind was still. The sky was quiet. Even the birds had stopped singing. Then a man stepped forward. He was one of the brave volunteers, a hunter from the edge of ISU, known not for his strength, but for his fearless heart. In one hand, he held a thick chisel. In the other, a heavy iron hammer. His arms trembled slightly, but his eyes stayed fixed on the towering iron statue. He walked to its base, knelt briefly, then rose and placed the chisel at the foot of the monument. He raised the hammer, and struck. Tang! The sound rang through the air like a cry. It echoed off rooftops, bounced off the hills, and sent birds flying from the trees nearby. But the statue did not move. The base did not crack. Not a chip. Not a dent. It remained perfect, untouched, unbothered, and defiant. The man stepped back, confused. Another volunteer stepped forward. A stronger one this time, a mason, used to breaking bricks with a single swing. He struck the same spot, harder. Tang! Still nothing. Not even a scratch. A third man came. He swung 3 times, sweat running down his face, muscles tight with effort. Tang! 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 Nothing. The statue stood firm. Its long iron blade reflected the morning sun like it was laughing. King Okendo stepped forward slowly, his voice low and dry. What manner of metal is this? A murmur swept through the crowd. Some people stepped back. Others held their breath. It was not normal. Not iron. Not human. Then came the excavator. A massive diesel-powered machine, yellow and rusted from years of service, yet still powerful. It rumbled down the road like a beast awakened. The jaws rose high. The operator, a fearless man from a neighboring village, gave a nod and revved the engine. 1 meter. 2 meters. The excavator moved forward, jaws wide, ready to rip the statue from its roots. And then, the engine died. Suddenly. No noise. No stutter. No smoke. Just silence. The operator tried again. He turned the key once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. People looked around, confused. A second excavator was summoned from a construction site nearby. Bigger. Newer. It rolled forward slowly, reached the same spot. And also shut down. Dead engine. Dead silence. Nothing worked. It was as if the ground had rejected every machine that dared approach the idol. All eyes turned toward Pastor Bassi. He had been watching from the side, calm but deeply focused. Now, he stepped forward, his Bible in one hand, a small bottle of oil in the other. His head lifted toward the sky. The wind stirred. A single leaf blew across the roundabout. Then he began to pray. O God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob,
the King of all
his
kings,
voice
by the
rolled like
power in the
thunder,
mighty name of
the
Jesus,
one who
I
brings
command you to
kingdoms
fall.
low, the one who sees blood and remembers, the one who hears the cry of the oppressed. He lifted the Bible high. My car did not stop in this village by accident. You sent me here, not for a visit, but for war. The people of ISU have seen pain. They have buried sons and daughters. The ground is soaked with tears and blood. But today, Lord, they are ready. They have repented. They have chosen you. The wind grew stronger. The trees shook. We come not with bullets, nor bulldozers, but with the name that is above every name. He turned to the statue. You evil, blood-sucking idol. I do not come in my name. I do not come in fear. I come in the name of Jesus Christ, the Lion of Judah, the King of all kings. His voice roared across the square.
By the
power in the mighty name of Jesus, I command you to fall. Silence. The crowd held their breath. Then, CRACKA boom. The sky split open. A single bolt of lightning, bright and violent, tore through the clouds and struck the statue with the force of a heavenly hammer. It hit the blade first, melting part of it in mid-air. Then it slammed into the chest, causing a massive explosion of sparks. Finally, it tore into the ground itself, splitting the earth beneath the statue's base. The iron screamed. The statue cracked, once, twice. Then it collapsed. With a deafening crash, the once mighty monument fell to the ground in ruins. Iron split. The blade shattered. The head rolled across the road. The people fell to their knees, covering their heads. Dust. Fire. Silence. The curse was broken. But it wasn't over yet. At the side of the roundabout, Chief Aji stood, arms folded, smirking, lips curled in mockery. He had laughed at the prayers, laughed at the tools, laughed at the king. But now, his smile faded. He gasped. He clutched his chest. His knees gave way. And right there, in front of everyone, Chief Aji fell to the ground. His guards rushed forward, calling his name. No answer. Chief Aji was gone. The silence after the storm. No one moved. The crowd stood frozen. The king, once full of grief, slowly dropped to his knees. He did not cry. He did not speak. He simply whispered, "It is finished." Pastor Bassi lowered his Bible and closed his eyes. "To God be the glory," he said softly. "The land is free." The wind passed over the ruins. The blade was broken. And so was the curse. The dust settled. The fire was gone. The wounds remained, in memory, in history, in the hearts of many. But the land was free. For the first time in years, the Eek roundabout stood still, not in dread, but in peace. No screams pierced the night. No more morning songs echoed through the streets. No fresh blood darkened the tar beneath speeding tires. What once stood as a monument to pride and secret power had been torn down by something greater than machines, greater than kings, the hand of God himself. And now, the people of ISU chose to build again. But not in steel. Not in shadow. Not in fear. They built a simple statue of Jesus. It wasn't grand. It wasn't carved from expensive marble. There was no golden plaque, no electric lights. Just stone and faith, planted where evil once reigned. The statue rose slowly, carried by the same villagers who once stood helpless as their loved ones died. Young men lifted it. Mothers wept beside it. Children placed small flowers at its feet. The king, now older, quieter, stood with the elders as the monument was unveiled. Pastor Bassi stood by his side, hands folded, eyes closed. A small plaque was fixed to the base. Jesus saves. That was all it said. But it said everything. From that day on, the roundabout was no longer called Eek Roundabout. It was renamed, by decree of both the people and the palace, Jesus Saves Roundabout. And something changed. In the next 5 years, not a single person died on that road. Accidents happened, yes, but none claimed a life. A twisted tire, a broken mirror, a bruised shoulder. But no more coffins. No more mass burials. No more blood on the road. Mechanics became busier than morticians. Doctors treated scratches, not corpses. And parents sent their children off in buses without muttered prayers of fear. It was, without doubt, a miracle. There were still bags of rice shared. Still cooking. Still singing. Still gifts. But this time, it was not Chief Aji's mansion that gave. It was the church. It was the people, giving to one another. Not from fear, but from thanksgiving. And Pastor Bassi? He did not ask for land. He did not start a branch of his ministry in ISU. He didn't even put up a banner. He simply left. Quietly. Peacefully. But his name lived on the lips of old women, in the songs of children, in the stories told by fathers to sons, mothers to daughters. The man God sent to set us free. The land had known darkness, but now it had seen light. And the light did not leave. It stayed, in the prayers of the people, in the peace of the roads, and in the Jesus statue that stood like a watchman in the heart of ISU. A symbol, a witness, a warning. To all who passed by, it spoke, not with a blade, but with grace. Evil may build, but only God saves. Jesus saves. Let it be known, from ISU to every village, every city, every nation. When men build idols, they fall. But when God speaks, creation bows. No money, no title, no ritual, no sacrifice can stand against the voice of the Almighty. Because power does not belong to thrones or to wealth. Power belongs to God, to His Word, to His will, to His hand. And in ISU, they will never forget. The day the blood stopped flowing. The day the idol fell. The day God came down, and evil had no choice but to fall. This is a true life story that happened in Igbo community years ago. Witnessed by Valentino. Written by Valentino. Kindly subscribe to this channel and share to your loved ones. Give me your thoughts on the comments section, and I hope you enjoyed this story.